Okay, welcome back from break. I hope that you got some snacks. I see some people did, and you're energized and ready to dive into design thinking. So we talked about innovation as being necessary for growth and scaling up our business. Now, how do you innovate? Design thinking is one methodology, one of several, but one methodology that you may use to innovate within your organization. And so I'm going to cover innovation and the 5 stages of innovation relatively quickly because I have even more information I want to share with you before my time is up. So how many of you have ever heard of design thinking prior to today? So I see some yeses and some nos. What have you heard about it for those of you who are saying yes? What is your exposure level to it? Do you mind sharing?
I first heard about it probably 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's when it finally made its way into the mainstream marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a lot of speakers that were coming in and trying to teach design thinking and consultancies that were using the design thinking approach.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so it's actually been around for over a decade. It emanated out of Stanford University. One of the professors there, David Kelly, started the innovation, the D school is what they call it, design school, and just loved designing products and services and using design thinking so much that he started IDEO, which is a company that focuses on doing just that for lots of other companies. And so Tim Brown was the CEO up until earlier this year, and he had been the CEO for quite some time. And so he described design thinking as being human-centered, and that I think is what really sets design thinking apart from other problem-solving methodologies, because the entire time it keeps you focused on your end users. Who is actually your customer? Who's actually using your service, and how are they experiencing the utilization of your service? And it's collaborative. It's a collaborative approach to problem solving, because oftentimes when you create a design thinking team, you want people who are functionally diverse, diversity in every area. You might want generational diversity, functional diversity, racial diversity. I'm going to show you a video in a minute, and you're going to see people on this design thinking team who, some of them are biologists, some are engineers, some are architects, one is an artist. So you want that diverse representation of thought, because it's going to help you collaborate and create even more. And it's using a designed mindset to solve complex problems. A designed mindset is one that learns from failure. I'm often reminded of a quote by Jeff Bezos. He says that if anyone in his organization has a 1 in 10 chance of earning a 100-time return on an investment, he wants them to take that chance every time. A 1 in 10 chance. That means he has to be comfortable with failure 9 times out of 10. How comfortable are we with failure? And are we at a point where we can learn from that failure and turn it into a lesson that can help us as we look forward even more? You have to also be uncomfortable with ambiguity, because design thinking is really about discovering more about what your customers enjoy and what they don't enjoy about your product or service, and then thinking of ways that you can alleviate those challenges for them. So you really have to be comfortable with ambiguity and also with reframing. You can't get too committed to one particular solution, because you never know when you may get feedback from your customer that it's not really working, and so you might have to change that particular product or service. So design thinking is a really human-centered process that can help you solve complex problems. So we're going to take a look at this video, and I want you to pay particular attention to the different phases that they go through to reach their ultimate solution. Pay attention to the people and how they're interacting with each other, and see, is that different from the approach that you take today in problem solving, and how that might inform you to improve. Okay, so that was really design thinking in a nutshell. You want to get me back? So what did you think?
Brilliant.
Brilliant?
Brilliant.
Yes.
I mean, it really was. I mean, it was a very clever solution that they wound up coming up with.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing the bits and pieces being created along the way, and then the combination. I wasn't prepared for what they unveiled, but I liked so many of the ideas coming to it. But yeah, the teamwork effort, and nobody's idea was bad. It was all contributed to ultimately
Yes, definitely.
Collaboration, I like that.
Yes, a high degree of
Yes,
collaboration.
yes.
Absolutely. Yes. What else did you notice?
The different degrees and things that they had, that each one of them had, and they could bring to the table.
So educated differently, diversely, yes.
Kind of did what we talked about immediately before, where they went and got input from the end users, or
Yes.
just basically the low level people that deal with it day in, day out.
Exactly. The store manager, the customers even. Someone
I
else.
thought it was just interesting that the one idea that they had about the scanner being on the side of the shopping cart, because now Sam's Club, you can go in there and shop and use your phone, the app on your phone, and scan your products as you go, and you can pay for it right there, and go ahead and leave out the store without ever dealing with anyone else.
That's nice. I didn't know that. I go to Costco. I wish they would adopt something like that. That's great. So basically what you saw was a really quick, condensed version of a design thinking project. And they were assigned the shopping cart, but as you could see, they've designed so many other products. And you can use this for service as well as your internal processes. Design thinking is a way to accelerate innovation. And it allows you to create better solutions to the challenges facing business and society. And the ultimate solution that you land upon should really be the overlap between what's desirable, meaning your end user sees it as relevant and needed in their lives. It's feasible, meaning that technically and structurally it's possible to implement this within your organization. And then it needs to be viable, which means that it is financially sustainable for your organization as well. So the overlap between that is going to give you a really cool innovation that would bring value to your end users. So we're going to talk about the 5 stages of design thinking, and then this is an overview, and then we're going to delve into each stage separately. It starts with empathizing, where you identify your end user, those key stakeholders who have key information about your product or service, and you want to really get into their world and see the challenges from their perspective. You also then move into defining the challenge. Out of all of those issues that you identified that your customer has with your product or service, you begin to define what is your overarching challenge, and then you ideate. This is the process of brainstorming, where you come up with as many ideas and possible solutions as possible. Then you prototype. As you recall from the video, they came up with numerous prototypes, and then they started combining features from each to create their final prototype. And then they test it. You test it, you take it out to one of your customers or a group of your end users to see what do they really think about it. And they will offer feedback that may cause you to go back to your ideation stage or to prototyping. And that's why we mentioned that you have to be open to learning. You have to be willing to learn from failure, because your first prototype is probably not going to be the final solution to really meet the needs of your customer. So that's the overall process. So let's talk about each stage separately. And before we do, we'll talk about how might entrepreneurs use design thinking as a way to grow and scale your business. Well, you can use this for improving or creating strategy within your organization. You can also use it to enhance and improve your live or digital customer experiences. In other words, how are your customers really experiencing your product or service? And then what are some of the challenges? And then how might you eliminate those challenges in terms of how your customer is experiencing your product? You can use it for the internal operations, and I'm going to give you a model today. Actually, you already have it, a model that you can use to analyze your internal processes and your programs and operations to see where you might concentrate on making those infrastructure improvements so that you will be ready to grow and scale your business. Service and service delivery, as well as marketing. So there are multiple uses for entrepreneurs for this kind of approach to innovation using design thinking. So stage 1 is empathizing. Empathizing is really about putting yourself in the shoes of your end user. How did they do that with the shopping cart example?
In other ways, it would be beneficial to, I guess, customers as they're using it.
Yes, they thought of ways. They talked about the safety concerns and how many children were injured each year. So they were creating this empathy for their design team and looking at the end user and the effect that the current design was having on their customer and how they were experiencing the utilization of that product. How about you? How do you know the experience of the end users of your product or service? How do you know what their challenges are? To what extent are you aware? Testing?
A lot of testing.
Okay. Tell us more about that, sir, if you don't mind.
Well, basically, for me, for example, I use my backyard for a lot of testing for the industry that I'm in. I do a lot of, as far as planning for the next year, a lot of new chemicals and things come out of, like for example, I redid half of my backyard with some new seed that I plan on using next year just to see, what the results are going to be. Because a lot of times we might jump on a new product or something, and then just give it straight to the client. I've made a lot of mistakes like that, lose a lot of money because the results are poor.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to do a lot of testing before you put it out there to people
Okay.
pay money for it.
That's an excellent way to empathize with your end user, to see if it actually works for you, if you actually like that product before you add it to your list of products that you offer to your customers. Thank you for sharing that example. But you analyze those problems from their perspective. How do they like it, and what challenges are they experiencing with it? Jeff Bezos also stated that if you're competitor focused, you have to wait until there is a competitor doing something. You really need to be customer focused, and this allows you to be more pioneering. So you're not going to just wait until your competitors do something and mimic what they're doing, but constantly innovate by staying in touch with your customers, understanding what their real unarticulated needs are, and figuring out how you can better serve and meet those needs and make it more convenient, make it more efficient, make it more effective, offer a higher quality product for your customers to enjoy. So we've talked about that. So the next stage is to define the challenge. So you're going to ultimately collect a lot of data as you're talking to and observing your customers, maybe doing focus groups with your customers to really understand. And then from all of that data, how do you then narrow it down to see where do you want to focus? Remember in the video, the shopping cart video, how they talked about focusing. This was not organized chaos, it's focused chaos. So you have to figure out where are we going to focus our energy, our effort, and our attention. And I do have a process that you can use as you're looking internally. How do you begin to identify those major pain points in your organization and your operations as a beginning point for where you might focus as you're defining the challenge? The next stage is ideate. As you're ideating, this is the really fun, creative part where you're brainstorming and no idea is a bad idea. Who remembers what they said in the video if someone starts to analyze and critique? Yes, they had the bell, because this is not the stage yet to start analyzing and critiquing. In fact, there are some rules of engagement for engaging in the brainstorming. And you noticed in the video where these rules were posted around the room as a constant reminder to defer judgment. Because again, this isn't the stage where you really want to cull the ideas or stifle the ideas. You really want to promote generous thinking around what a potential solution might be. It says encourage wild ideas. It's important to encourage those wild ideas because it may seem outlandish at first, but then that might stimulate more creative thinking around a solution that really may work. So you want to encourage those wild ideas, build on the ideas of others, as well as staying focused on the topic. And one of the questions or question formats that we use a lot in design thinking is how might we? How might we, and I'm going to go back to the Walmart example, how might we save busy families time and money was their design challenge question. Or if you think about your organization, how might I create a service that's more relevant and useful for my end users? Or some other question, how might we create processes internally that are suitable for the kind of employees that we're trying to retain? So it's up to you to really think about where your biggest challenge is and use this as a way to stay focused when you're brainstorming. So oftentimes when I'm working with design teams, we will have that how might we question posted on the board or on a flip chart, just so that we, as we're brainstorming, we can stay focused around that topic. Also, one conversation at a time, so that everyone's voice is heard as they're producing and suggesting their ideas. And you want to be visual. Do you recall in the shopping cart video how they were sketching out potential solutions? So it's important to, don't be afraid to use your stick figures if you need to. That's okay. Because sometimes a picture can convey meaning a lot more than the words. So be visual and don't be afraid to use your stick figures and go for quantity. At this stage, volume is best. You want as many ideas of potential solutions as possible. So these are some of the brainstorming rules that can help you and your team come up with many ideas and possible solutions for your customers. Yes?
I actually have two questions. So going back to your end user and kind of seeing what their challenges are, what they, the challenge, what was the first one? Okay, empathizing with them to find like analyzing the problem.
Yes.
And stuff like that. So if your end user, let's say you don't have a big group, if I'm servicing maybe 5 clients right now, then do I take what those 5 say, or do I try to branch out into like potential clients and find out what, their problems are?
You want to do both.
Okay.
So you want to talk to your existing customers. In fact, when we do a full day laboratory on design thinking, what we teach people is to look at your extreme users. You want to observe, have interviews, have conversations with people who love your service and use it all the time, as well as those who would never even think about stepping foot into a therapy center. So you want to talk to them because that's going to give you your greatest insight in terms of where you might focus your energy for designing a solution that would attract those who would never use your service. And then combine that with the information that you learn from those who absolutely love your service and sign up for therapy on a weekly basis. So we call those the extreme users. So you want to identify those individuals, observe them, talk to them, interview them, ask them to write down what their experience is like. But what you're trying to do there is really extract meaning from them in terms of why they use your service or why they don't use your service. Matt, you would want to talk to people who have never tried a MacBook and find out why not. How do you educate the end users? Maybe it's an education component there. So that's why you want to really focus on those who really love it and those who have never even tried it.
And my second question, going back to brainstorming, the last tip, go for quantity. So you're saying like you really want volume and to get like as many ideas, wild ideas from like everybody on the team.
Yes.
Now let's say right now, which is true for me, my team consists of me. So, I do.
That helps.
Plenty. Some of them I try not to listen to though. So, and I have seen other, I guess talks and everything where it says, try having a team when there isn't a team, trying to do like stuff. So, I don't know, I guess if I don't have the funds to like hire certain people to do this and to that, how can I go about getting, more ideas and not just my own voice and voices without having a large team?
So I suggest that you look around and find those who are in your industry who may be solopreneurs as well, and form a collaborative with them, so that maybe you all meet for lunch or just agree to let's have a half-day meeting where we talk about our industry and what's going well and what we can do to improve and generate ideas and support each other. Because, and we haven't gotten to that part of our slide presentation, but we're going to talk about collaboration. Also, this is a community of learners right here around you. How many of you are solopreneurs right now? Look around. Look at all of the diversity here that they may be willing to say, let's do a half-day design thinking, and we're going to spend an hour focusing on your business, your service, and we're all going to pour into you and your business and ideas that we can generate to help your business. Then we're going to spend an hour talking about my business, and you're going to give me ideas. So collaborate in that way as well. And the beauty of this learning community is that you probably all have different backgrounds and different types of businesses. So that would be great because it adds that level of diversity and diverse thought to a brainstorming session.
And Athens has some good entrepreneurial groups. Athens may join some other, or Athens and Athens may join,
Chamber, Envision, Athens,
do Million Cups.
Right. And so there are probably lots of resources like that, but you're sitting in one right now, a very key resource. So I encourage you all to continue this learning community. I know today is your last day in the program, but the learning community does not have to end. Stay in touch with each other, check in on each other, and you all can still congregate and have meetings and brainstorming sessions where you're supporting each other. Okay, you're welcome. And then the next stage is prototyping. This is where you really want to, as you saw in the video, as you're brainstorming, you want to select an idea that you want to carry forward out of that brainstorming session. And it should be certainly related to your design thinking challenge question. It needs to be simple. It's an experimental model of a proposed solution, and you want to either sketch it out or you want to use inexpensive materials to create a model, if you need such a model, to be able to explain it to others or to your end users. You want to be able to somehow communicate that. And the key words here are quickly and cheaply. Remember how in the video they created those prototypes? First they sketched them out and they talked about them, and then from that group of sketches they probably selected the best prototype that they were going to carry forward and actually build a model of that shopping cart. And you want to use inexpensive materials. And usually when I'm running design projects with teams, we will allocate less than $200 per team per idea. Bless you. Because if you invest a lot of money into a prototype, when your end user says, well, I like this part of it, but I don't like this part, you're going to feel some kind of way about having to go back and change after you've invested so much money into it. So at this stage, you want to create a very inexpensive prototype that you can then take to your end users and explain. And this is an example of how you keep prototyping really simple, and look at the cheaply made materials that they're using to convey the idea and to check for usability and relevance with your customers. And this is another way that you can create and communicate your prototype by using storyboards. And this is a particular storyboard that shows a process that they were proposing in terms of being able to determine if a product is recyclable or not. You see the gentleman standing there and they're wondering, is this bottle recyclable? He takes a picture of it, sends it to the county recycle office. They see it and send a message back and say yes, and then the person puts it into the basket. So in 4 frames, they're able to really articulate the overall vision for how this process would work. So you can use storyboards to do this, or cheaply made materials to convey the idea. So that's the prototype. And then once you generate a viable prototype, you want to test it. You want to take it to a group of your users, end users, and see how they are using the product and what they're getting out of it. And here are some guidelines for how you test a product. You want them to let your users compare alternatives and observe them as they're using your product or service. You want to show, don't tell, let them experience your prototype, and then ask them to talk you through their experience as they're using it. And then observe them, and certainly ask a lot of questions, because your main goal here is to understand how they're experiencing that product or that service. Yes?
We were testing a lot of the products in our shop, and customers, we believe, was so nice, they wouldn't tell us the truth. We really wanted them to say, did you like that? Oh, yeah. But the way we really told is if they bought it again. And so we were able to kind of track how much repeat, because I think they were just didn't want to be discouraging. So sometimes you have to have something in place to get a follow-up on that reaction. I don't know what that is.
And in a situation like that, be mindful of the types of questions that you're asking, because a question like, do you like it, can be leading.
Okay.
So yes, a person would feel kind of obligated to say yes, they don't want to hurt your feeling. But if you were to ask, how could we improve this product? Or what could we do to improve our service to you? Then that generates a different level of thinking and a different kind of response. So be careful about the kinds of questions you ask during the testing phase, and you may want to generate your list of questions and then share it with a colleague and say, hey, what do you think about these questions? So definitely use each other for feedback on this entire process. So if you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. This is where you need to be open to this feedback that your users may come back and say, well, there's a lot. And you remember in the shopping cart video, when they took the final prototype back out to the supermarket, one of the workers said, I like it. I mean, there's some things that need to change about it, but I like it. I would use it. So could you imagine how the designers, after all of that work, may have felt when that lady said, oh, there are some things that you need to change, but you can't be so committed to a solution that you're unwilling to invite that kind of feedback and to be willing to make those adaptations as necessary. So that's the 5-stage design thinking process. What questions do you have about any one of these stages? Okay, well, in order to use design thinking in your company to grow and scale, a very wise leader, author, speaker said, I love her and I follow her all the time. She's so brilliant. She said the key to launching design thinking in any organization is to first make the necessary culture corrections. I've seen so many organizations say, we love design thinking. Can you come in and teach us how to do it? Okay, go innovate. That is not how this works. If you have a culture that's punitive and that is risk averse and that has not been listening to its employees, then you can't just go in and say, let's start innovating, because there's no trust there at that point. Oftentimes we think we're ready to innovate, but because of budget and because of time constraints, and we think maybe our end users won't understand it, when our employees bring us ideas, we're like, oh, this is really innovative, but we can't consider it. We've never really done that before, or we don't have time, or we don't have the budget, or whatever excuse or obstacle you may present. How open are you as the business owner to receiving that feedback or those ideas from your employees and from your team? And even if you all were to meet as a collaborative, how open are you to receiving their feedback? So you want to be sure that you have a culture within your organization that's really ready to embrace a collaboration type culture. Dr. Linda Hill is a professor at Harvard University, and she said that unless people freely open their minds and hearts, they're unlikely to offer their very best ideas or to endure the sense of vulnerability and anxiety that innovation creates. And it can be really anxiety producing because you're putting your best idea out there. And at some point during the design thinking process, someone might say, well, that's not going to work, or that's not really feasible. It sounds great, but it's not really feasible for our organization. We don't have the technology platform that we need for a solution like that. So it really puts you in a vulnerable position, and you've got to create the environment so that people will feel comfortable doing that. The way that you create the willingness to innovate is to, first of all, have a common purpose. I'm going to take you back to the shopping cart example. They all had a common purpose for gathering and participating in the design thinking process. They also had shared values. We could see that there was really not a hierarchy in that organization. The project manager, they said, was selected not because he was brilliant at designing shopping carts, but because he was great with people. So he was the project manager. So they had shared values around how to go about accomplishing all of this. They also had a sense of community. You have to create a sense of community and belonging, because that builds trust in your organization. And if there's no trust, people aren't going to be willing to open up and share their ideas about how to innovate. And then you have to have rules of engagement. I shared some of the rules of engagement with you, that list of brainstorming guidelines and rules of engagement. Notice those were posted around the room. There is a Center for Innovation in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I earned my certification in design thinking. And those rules of engagement for brainstorming were printed around the perimeter of the room as a constant reminder of the shared values and the rules of engagement for engaging in this kind of work. And so that is the kind of culture that you really need to have in place, a culture of radical collaboration, where there are mutual goals, a common purpose, and understanding around what those goals are. That's where the communication piece comes in. A jointly developed structure, meaning we're both on the same page and we're supportive of each other in terms of the kind of loose structure that we have within the organization, so that we're accessible and that people feel comfortable, because there's not such a strict hierarchy governing how we interact with each other. Shared responsibility. If you think about the shopping cart example, each team knew what they were responsible for. Do you recall how at one point they said it became autocratic very temporarily, just so they could bring some organization to which teams would be charged with working on different aspects of the prototype? So there was shared responsibility there. Also, mutual authority and accountability for success, and then sharing of resources and rewards. They all were able to celebrate and share at the end of having created this newly designed shopping cart. So these are some of the elements of radical collaboration. Do you see within your organization that some of these elements are already there, or do you think there will be some challenges in implementing some of these?
So for a corporate environment or an office environment, some of these concepts are higher thinking, right? But then what about companies that have, a wide range of people? They may not have been ever exposed to anything, like they don't think like this.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have to change the culture, do you go into organizations where you help them change even the culture of thinking of their workers, for them to even move to a place where they can start collaborating?
Yes, and that's an excellent point, and we're going to get there momentarily, because that's the leadership aspect of organizational performance, and that is one of the transformational aspects of an organization, and so we're going to get to that in just a minute. Any others? What do you think would be challenging for your organization to transition to one of being radically collaborative?
Well, when you've got a very strong founder or the design person behind everything, whether it's the person with the recipes or the person with the personnel, to be able to share that. Because, the owner, the entrepreneur, has tremendous ownership of their business.
Mm-hmm.
And to be willing to spread that out and say, okay, what you've got to say is as valid as what I have to say, can be extremely difficult for an entrepreneur who oftentimes is a bit of an autocrat.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. But I want to bring your attention back to the shopping cart example. David Kelly is the founder of IDEO, but did you see how humble he was in his involvement? He was more or less the facilitator. He wasn't even really down into the details of helping them design these various prototypes. So yes, you're correct. In order for us to scale our business, we have to be willing to let go of some of the power and believe that our teammates have equal accountability, interest, enthusiasm for helping the business grow and succeed as you do. So you would have to be willing to give up some of that power and share some of that information, just like the company I told you disseminated their organizational strategy to all 8,000 workers. And they all came around to help redesign the organizational strategy. So yes, you have a question?
Well, actually, I wanted to piggyback off of what both of them said and then kind of pose it in the form of a question. Not really, but really.
Okay.
So, in Ms. Vicky's point, when you are dealing with individuals in an organization and the mindset is kind of, well, this is what I do, this is all I do, and I'm kind of planted in this way. But then also, as she pointed out, you know, when you are the person who hold on to the business, and so even when you have a sense of relinquishing that, you still have people who have that same mindset of, this is all I do. So I'm gonna put it, package it together, use myself. So my organization, now that I'm no longer outside of my own business, is family. Let's start with that. And so each individual that, like my son is out there and, you know, he has his own life and, you know, my husband does part of business, my other son, well, when he feels like it, I'm raising my daughters up to understand that that's how they're gonna pay to stay in my house. So they're all empowered because this is a family business, but their attitude and mindset is, well, I'm the grill person, I'm the deliverer, you know, I'm the when I feel like it, and my girls are just kind of like, well, just tell me where to stand. So when you're trying to scale and go further, what do you do with that? Does that make sense?
Right, and so it sounds like you really need to start building more collaboration around what a team looks like, build more understanding around what a team looks like and how their contributions are equally as important. If they're the grill person, if they're the hostess, it doesn't matter. And that if you all aren't equally contributing to the success of the company, then the company may not succeed and you may all be out of a job or a livelihood. So impress upon them the importance of their voice being contributed to coming up with solutions for the organization, and then give them space and time to do that. Sometimes we may say, I want your opinion, but if you don't have a system in place to collect those opinions or to create a forum so that they can voice their opinion and give you feedback, then you're not going to receive it. So it's going to be important for you to not only say that to them, but then follow that through with actually putting a system in place to be able to empower them and make their voices heard around how you might innovate.
Even though they strongly feel like their contribution is just what they're doing and they don't want to go outside as, I mean, I can't really fire my husband and my kids. I mean, I can, but they're not really on payroll, so.
Well, the more you need to do that, the more conversations you all need to have around the importance of everyone contributing their ideas. So that's going to take time. It's going to take helping them understand the culture that you're trying to transition to, because they've been comfortable not sharing that information up to this point. I mean, you can say, it's a new day, and I've participated in this program, and now I see the kind of culture we need to have. And so going forward, this is how we're going to work collaboratively as a team, and I need your buy-in. Help me understand what you need in order to feel comfortable making suggestions such as this. So get more and more of their buy-in. Give them the opportunity to tell you how this needs to be structured, what support they need, because that way you're going to have even more buy-in from them.
Gotcha.
No, not a survey. Not necessarily a survey, a conversation. You know, we live in this digital world where we want to get an answer really quickly without having a conversation with people. And I'm an advocate of let's go back to talking, to actually having a dialogue, actually talk to people and say, this is how we're going to move forward. I want your feedback, your input. What would you like to share? And I think that face-to-face, coming from your heart as the founder, as the owner of the company, they're going to see that you have completely bought into this way of operating the business. And speaking from that level of sincerity, I think they'll get on board. Yes, sir, you have a question?
That's a comment.
Okay, sure.
And I like this system, and I just want to share. So for my business, it's called Grizzly Delivery. So one of the things we also do is passenger transportation. And we take people to the airport. That's why I was late actually coming here. I was at the Atlanta airport. But there's a couple other guys that I collaborate with that pretty much do the same thing that I do. And I just, we kind of found each other from advertising local. So we met at Starbucks and we kind of like interviewed each other and talked about like mutual goals, shared responsibility, just to get to see, how we run like each business, how each one runs. And so for instance, like one of the guys, he has a larger vehicle. The other one is kind of the same size vehicle that I have, right? So like if somebody books a ride, and they need a larger vehicle, I'll ask one of them to do that ride. Or if I can't do the booking that day, I'll ask this other one if he can do it, and he'll do it, and vice versa. So we kind of like share the responsibility and share each other's goals and stuff like that. So it's working, but I don't know how to do that like when I start to have employees. I don't know how that's gonna work, but it's interesting. But this radical collaboration is kind of what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
That is right.
And really,
Yeah.
It's almost like a co-op.
That's
right, it's a strategic partnership, and that's really, yes.
We're doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And stuff like, so it's working good. But we had to make sure that, what was important to the other person, because like the reputation is so important for each of us. So we wanted to make sure that that was like to the forefront. But we didn't send a survey or nothing, like we sat down and talked.
Yes.
And it was much better.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the art of conversation should not be lost. Okay, well, you all, I am actually out of time, unfortunately, but I do want to point your attention to one other thing. Bart, do they have the handout of the assessment? You have the assessment already? I want to draw your attention to that because this is your homework. I want you to ensure that you take some time to complete this assessment because this is going to really point you towards those major pain points in your organization where you might start focusing to really build the infrastructure of your organization prior to scaling up, prior to growing. These are your internal operations that really have to be strengthened in order for you to be prepared to grow and to scale. So take some time to complete this assessment, and then that then becomes your focus area for applying design thinking. Okay? So I really appreciate your energy today around this topic, and of course, you have my contact information, I think, and I also have business cards up here if you would like to stay in touch, if you have more questions or need additional support in carrying this out to improve and to enhance your business. I'm certainly available to assist with that. But thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your session. Thank you.